And I'm going to welcome everybody to this session. Alison Shaw is going to convene on this family line for Thomas and Anne Hassall on the 3rd of September of 2022. Welcome online, everybody. I'm going to just hand over to Alison, and we look forward to the evening that we have together.
Okay, Graham, I'm just checking. I've got screen highlighted. That's right. Oh, yes. So welcome, everybody. And Graham very generously tags in with me with information that we're going to do this evening. But I'm going to start, and Graham, the chair of the Hassall Family History Association, will fill in what I neglect to say at the end. So I think if we can go, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And I love the touch of red that we've got floating around there. Yeah. And I just want to double check. Can everybody see the screen okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter which way I spell Hassall for one, but we're all Hassalls in name, and probably some of us Hassalls by nature too. Okay, so we're all Hassalls. Who are you? How are you a Hassall? What do you know, and what do you want to know? So as I go on to the next blank screen, we're just going to walk around and who we've got. So just to introduce yourself, where you are, where do you fit in with the Hassalls, who's your link to the Hassalls through the children of Roland, and where you're at this evening and what you want to know from the Hassalls. So I guess I'll just start. I'm from Thomas. I live in Epping. I'm the secretary of the Hassall Family History Association, and I'm going to present you with some information about the Hassall family this evening. Some of it you'll know, some of you'll think, where'd you get that from? Or some of you'll say, wow, I didn't know. So hopefully you get a touch of a bit of everything there. So I can't see what order we want to go in. So Graham, how do you do this? Because I can't understand.
Well, Alison, if you can't see everybody who's online, I could just invite very quickly. Can you see people?
I can see 4.
Okay, well, we've got 17 participants.
Lovely.
Okay, so I'm just going to start at the top of my screen with David Hassall.
Yes, my name is David Hassall. Obviously a descendant of Samuel, one of the children of the 2 Hassalls. I think that's enough. It was 17 people.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. James Daniel, unmute and say hello. James, unmute.
I can't hear you, James.
Yes, no, all good there, David. The most commonly used phrase in Zoom conversations, unmute please, so all done. My name is James Daniel. My grandmother is Laura Daniel, nee Hassall, and she's the great granddaughter of Samuel and Lucy Hassall. I'm a 6th generation descendant of the Samuel and Lucy Hassall line. I live in French's Forest East and Sydney's Northern Beaches. And I've always been interested in Australian history, but what I find the Hassall Family History Association has been an excellent conduit to find out more about history, the family history at a personal level. Thanks very much. Looking forward to this evening.
Thanks, James. Next is Kay Clapton.
Hello, everybody. I'm descended through Thomas Hassall, then into his eldest son, James Samuel Hassall. And James Samuel Hassall moved up to Queensland in about 1867, I think. And most of my family was from Queensland. However, I live in Adelaide.
Thanks, Kate. Melissa Blanks. Just need to unmute, Melissa.
I have to say it again. Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa. I'm descended from the Samuel, Hassall, and Lucy Mulholland line. And on the committee, the Hassall Family History Association Committee, and been there for about 3 years and involved in organising the event next year.
Thanks, Melissa. Richard Clark.
Good evening, everyone. I've just married a Hassall descendant. My wife, Anne, is a descendant of the Reverend James Samuel Hassall through the Tooth line. Her maiden name was Dot. Obviously, my interest has been in researching the genealogy of the Hassall family.
Thanks, Richard. Jane Muir.
Hello, everybody. I live in Narrabeen in Sydney, the Lower North Shore. I'm a direct descendant of Thomas Hassall through Marianne Hassall marrying George Hope. They had a daughter, Catherine Elizabeth Hope, and they had a daughter, Marion Hope Betts, who was my grandmother. So,
Thank you, Jane. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
that's all right.
Jenny Tasker.
Yeah, hi. I am from Thomas Hassall, and I'm cousins with Alison and Catherine, and Naomi is my sister. So all of them are online tonight, I believe. I've always been interested in our family history. I live in Perth. Well, I've lived in Perth now for 20 years, but I would dearly love to be back in Sydney poking my nose in all the Hassall and Marsden stuff, but that's not to be. And I'm an avid ancestry.com person and have done lots of chasing of rallies and so forth. So yeah, I just always loved our family history.
That's great. Thanks, Jenny. Catherine Hope. I need to unmute and say hello.
So I can unmute. My name is actually Catherine Elizabeth Hope, and I'm the older sister of Alison Shaw, who's presenting, and Janet, who's also in the conference, and a descendant of the Reverend Thomas Hassall. I will let Alison do all the give all the information about our line, because there's no point in us saying it 3 times over. I live in Geraldton, which is about nearly 500 kilometres north of Perth, and I've been here for a long time, and I look forward to coming back to the Hassall reunion. And I did take my 3 children to the first one all those years ago. Okay, thanks.
Thanks so much, Catherine. David Hope.
Yeah, my name's David Hope. I'm a cousin to all of the aforementioned. So I come through Thomas Hassall. I live in Windsor on the outskirts of Sydney. That's me.
Thank you. Janet.
Hello there. I'm sister of Alison, Catherine, and cousins of all the David and Jennifer and Naomi. I don't know who else is there. I'm from the mid-north coast, up Port Macquarie Way, but I'm actually here in Bathurst with Mum and Dad not so far away. Unfortunately, he can't be on FaceTime, but look forward to hearing what happens tonight, and have been in the throes of Thomas Hassall's and the history for the last 40 years in our family.
Thanks, Janet. Naomi.
Yes, hi everyone. So I'm sister to Jenny and Adrian, who's near Margaret Hope, and cousin to many others. I live in Sydney. I thank you very much for organising this. I just think it's a privilege to be able to walk in the places where the people that we descended from walked, and to be able to have that direct documented connection to our, the early days of white settlement.
Thanks so much. Margaret Hope.
These are my nieces. They didn't say I was their aunt, mind you, but anyhow, my nieces and nephews, there's a nephew there. I was brought up on a diet of ancestor worship. My father just lived and breathed it all. And so I come from is Catherine Elizabeth Hope, and she married, God, I've forgotten. Anyhow, there's Catherine Elizabeth Hassall who married Robert Hope, and that's where I come from, that line. I did go to a meeting at the State Library a couple of years ago, and I took with me, which I could get now, but I haven't brought it in with me, but I actually have Catherine Elizabeth's watch. And it's actually described in this book, in Old Australia, how it was stolen one night. And they do try and track down who'd stolen it and where it was. And it was eventually found in the bole of an old tree. And there it had lain for many years and been weathered, of course, and lost its face, a beautiful enamel face. However, the reason it was found is because they had one of their servants was eventually sent for execution for some reason or other, and on the scaffold he was confession, and he was the one who'd stolen the watch, and he told them where the watch was, and I had that watch.
Thank you, Margaret. And we remember when you came to the Sydney meeting and showed us the watch. So that was lovely, and we hope to see it again. Just a few more of our family members. And also, we also got a special guest who I'm leaving for the last. Charlie and, I've forgotten Charlie and...
Christine and
right.
my sister Sue.
Nice to, oh, okay. Well, please say hello and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. We're just new into all of this family tree, and we're very excited to be part of this. We come down the Harriet Jane Hassall and the John Norton Oxley line. So our great-grandfather was Alistair George Rowe, who married Mary Molesworth. And then we had our grandfather is Ernest Rowe, and then it's Alistair and then my dad. So we come down the Oxley side.
That's wonderful. And we met you a few years ago in Sydney. You came to the meeting.
Yes.
That was great.
Yeah, pre-COVID.
Yeah, pre-COVID. We'll see you again. So just a few more. Hannah Moran.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Yeah, my name's, it's actually Anne Moran. I'm on my daughter's computer.
Okay, Anne. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. And I'm from the Robert William is my father, and Robert Ransom is his dad. So I'm 7th generation. Yeah, and I live in Brisbane.
Okay, wonderful. Okay.
Yes.
We've got a few family members in Brisbane, maybe not online tonight, but and I'm in Surfers Paradise, Gold Coast.
Okay.
Kevin, is that Kevin Radigan in Rome? Kevin, can you say hello? Kevin, you there?
No.
Oh, they'll catch up later. I mentioned we have a special guest with us, and it's Ross Whelan. And Ross, thanks for joining. And just to tell everybody where you work and who you are.
Thanks, Graham. I'm the principal of Thomas Hassall Anglican College, the only I think named after any of the Hassalls, and we're going to be part of big celebrations next year and host.
No, they didn't appear to.
A couple of the events.
Well, who's talking?
We're located out of Liverpool, not so far away from Thomas Hassall's, Thomas and Anne's property down there at Cobbity, and we have 1,800 students there, and it's we're looking forward to being part of the celebrations. Thanks very much for.
Thanks, Ross. That's wonderful. Kevin,
Graham, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, certainly.
It's Rosemary Hassall, but we don't seem to be able to fix something.
Oh, you'll be able to find the camera on the bottom left. Is a sign says stop video. You hit it once and we can see you.
Kevin's doing all this.
Okay. Well, you can say hello anyway, and then just tell us where you are, because I know you're in the south, in the cold country.
Yes, indeed. Yes, we live on a farm near Yass. This is my second husband, Kevin Rattigan, and I grew up on a cattle station in far north Queensland, and I love the land. Yeah, I'm descended from the Reverend James through Thomas Frederick, and my dad, who went to far north Queensland from Sydney when he was about 23 and ended up on managing the cattle station. So that's about it, I think.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks for joining, and thanks everyone for joining. Now, Alison, you just have to share again and start up your PowerPoint, maybe from that page that you had us on.
Okay, Graham. So, okay, so.
Are you able to hear them?
All right. Just bear with me, please. Technology. Graham, I've got to be able to see everyone, and I can see only one person.
That's your view at the top right.
Yeah.
You can choose what to see by hitting view.
Where? See, I can't.
But you wanted to get back
Oh.
to your PowerPoint and make your presentation, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
So
You had to hit share screen at the bottom and find that PowerPoint.
yes, but I can't see. Oh, hang on. Share screen. Got it. And
There we go.
right.
Thanks. We're in your hands now, and you're finished with the PowerPoint. There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for giving an idea of who we've got with this session. And Ross, thank you for giving your time up this evening to come and listen to it. Thank you. All right. So we know who people are. You're all descendants, so you're of Hassall. We know where you've come from. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background of yesteryear, I suppose, as Hassall. Hassall's came from England, and I believe we had a touch of going in France for a while as well. The Hassall history can be traced back to the 11th century. I'm saying that's very exciting, but I'm not going to do anything with that this evening. So that church in Bablake near Coventry is where two Hassalls were married in 1757. And so I'm going to start the story with Roland Hill Hassall and Elizabeth Hancock. And most of you will know those names. Roland Hill Hassall is our great grandfather. And Roland Hill was named Roland Hill because one of the family ministers was Reverend Roland Hill, and the Hassalls chose to call Roland Hill after the minister, first name and last name, which was not an uncommon practice. So Roland was born in Coventry in 1768, England, but he died in Australia in Parramatta in 1820. He's the youngest of 6 children, James Hassall and Elizabeth Whitmore, who were married in the church that you can see on your screen in Bablake. Elizabeth Hancock was born, she's just a touch older than Roland. She was born near Coventry in Woolston, England, and she died in Australia in Coventry, 1834. She was the 5th child of 12 children to John Hancock and Anne Horne, and they were also married in 1757. The Hassalls and the Hancocks families were silk weavers in Coventry in England, and so I suppose the close living enabled them both to know each other. Now you want to know Coventry, what was it famous for? Well, this is the only fun fact I'm going to do in this, but I thought that you all should probably know that Lady Godiva came from Coventry and did her famous ride through there. And then after Lady Godiva, a couple of centuries later, came the Hassalls. So to set the scene, Roland, who was born in 1768, as a 12-year-old, was apprenticed to his father, and his father was a weaver, as we know. And apprenticeships then were for 7 years. But Roland, and I don't know how the dates work out, but I'll fix them up later. He died, and that was his brush with death. And so he could hear people talking around him as he was in a coma, and we think laid in a coffin. He could hear people talking, but he couldn't make anybody realize that he was alive. When they did realize, he got out of the coffin and said, voila, I'm alive again. I must be a missionary. So he had that in the back of his mind while he sailed through the next few years. So I'm not sure of the dates, but I have read that he became a field preacher. So probably at the same time that he was a weaver, because he wouldn't have given up his day job, I don't think. And the famous Reverend Berder wrote some of the preaching sermons for him. I can't find any at the moment, but I probably haven't looked hard enough. Interestingly enough, Roland founded a Sunday school. Don't know the date. And he probably, and I have that in inverted commas because it's hard to know what probably means, but he was stoned by villagers. So here he's had a brush with death, and now he's being touched by a bit of community aggression, which wouldn't sit very well, but would form some of your opinions, I suppose. Then in 1793, Roland and Elizabeth decided that they would get married. Their firstborn came shortly afterwards in 1794, and that's where we all come from, the Thomas Hassall. His brother, Samuel O'Toole, was born not shortly afterwards. O'Toole, not very English name, but it was named after a king of one of the Pacific Islands, which we'll discover in a minute. So in 1796, Samuel O'Toole was just a baby. The Roland Hassall family set off on the ship, the Duff, from Gravesend, which is on the Thames, to an almost unknown land. And that's the ship, the Duff, that they came in. Quite a small ship. They arrived in Tahiti in 1797, after being at sea for 7 months. It was quite a dramatic voyage because they got to the bottom of Africa and had to turn back because of the wild weather. So they were at sea for a very, very long time. And he arrived in Tahiti, where through the London Missionary Society, he and other families and other missionaries were going to do their missionary work. An artisan missionary just means he had some other skills, working skills. Little baby Jonathan was born soon after that. But at a similar time, Roland was then attacked by the Tahitians, another community aggression thing that would have shaped him as well. That picture, the king is on the shoulders of one of the Tahitians, that's in Tahiti, and Elizabeth Hancock's, Roland's wife, has little Samuel in her arms, and Thomas, as a little 3-year-old, is standing by her. I would say, because this is probably taken around Christmas, painted around, depicting the scene around Christmas time, that she was about to deliver Jonathan shortly afterwards. So they're in Tahiti, and I've got to move that around. Within a month of the Duff leaving, so the ship leaving Tahiti, the missionaries believed that the islanders intended to take their property and to murder them. Not a great thing to be left with. That quote is from Anna Johnston, a professor of, I'm not quite sure, but I'll tell you when I find out. So the story continues. The Tahitians, so I'm sorry I've quoted here, in time came to resent the missionaries meddling in their customs and culture. And so almost a year to the day since their arrival on the Duff in Tahiti, they gathered their possessions, the children, Thomas, Samuel, and the new baby, Jonathan, a few live pigs, and rode into the darkness to the storm-damaged Nautilus. The ship had come into Tahiti in Matavai Bay for repairs. it didn't have a chance to be repaired because they rode out in the darkness. They climbed on board and set sail the next morning by light, not free to stay and face what might be a massacre, yet frightened about the voyage on a battered ship. The missionaries had to act as sailors. So Anna Johnston says again, their convictions, that is the missionaries' convictions about morality, culture, religion and race, had been thoroughly shaken. And so here they were, not heading for home. They weren't going to England, but instead were headed for the nearest place inhabited by white man, a miserable penal colony at the end of the civilized earth. So on the 14th of May, 1798, around into Port Jackson they limped, the vessel being so extremely leaky that it required the labour of all to keep it above water for the 44-day journey, and that's taken from the Hassall book. But 6 years later, after arriving in Parramatta, this is where the family lived, in this house. So this is the Hassall residence in George Street, downtown Parramatta, built in 1804. The Roland Hassall family, they had 9 children. Most of us on screen tonight come from Thomas. There are a few from the other families. They married, all of them married except the 9th child, who unfortunately died as a 2-year-old. They all produced, in red is the number of children. So Thomas Hassall and Anne Marsden had 9 children, etc., totaling. So the 9 children then produced 61 grandchildren, quite a lot. So in that short time, the Hassalls have kind of worked their way into Australia. So we have lots of Hassalls in Australia. And so 225 years later, which will take us to May next year, we're going to have another Hassall reunion. With the bicentenary was in 1998, and a lot of you on screen attended that. I certainly remember it vividly and I walked away very proud of being part of that Hassall family. So we want you to build your history and to know your Hassalls. And this event will embrace the legacy of Roland and Elizabeth Hassall, who we met a few slides earlier, who came from Coventry, and their children. And that's why we're doing family lines, for people to get to know everybody. So because we're coloured red, I put a red square there. And then when you go to the reunion, if you wear a touch of red, you will all know that who are from the Thomas line. So we want to know a little bit about Thomas Hassall. We know already where he was born, and we know as a 3-year-old he went to Tahiti on a ship for 7 months as a little child. And then the next year he had to watch all the missionaries around him as a 4-year-old hop on the ship, the Nautilus. He must have wondered what on earth life was all about. So at the age of 10, he then saw his father bashed and robbed and left for dead in Parramatta because Roland's servants had actually stolen cash that he'd kept, and they robbed and bashed him, and they actually left him for dead, and he took about 6 months to get better again. So I think they did a fairly good job of the bashing. And again, Roland is what touched by this community aggression. And Thomas, here as a young child, you wouldn't forget that. His wife Elizabeth, with a baby in arms, had to walk with one shoe on and one shoe off for several miles to actually get help. And so here starts to show the strength of the women that are right beside these men. Fancy hopping on a ship to go to Tahiti to be the wife of a missionary, and then have all that fear, hop on a leaky boat, arrive in Parramatta, and you still finding all these things that are going wrong. Thomas, though, as a 15-year-old, was had a job as a clerk, and his bosses boss went off for several months. I'm not quite sure whether, I think they went out of Australia, and Thomas was left in charge. And so that's showing what type of person Thomas is growing into. A few years later, he's with the talk that would have been around the dinner table of what was going on in the lives of Roland, etc. Thomas then, with the help of his father, established a Sunday school in his parents' home, in that home that I showed you. But as the numbers grew up to 150, they had to move into St. John's Church, Parramatta, where the Sunday school continued. And in the building there beside the church, they've actually got a room there called the Thomas Hassall Room. Thomas then decided that he would go into the missionary after he asked the hand in for marriage of a lady who turned him down and decided that she would marry Dr. William Bland instead. Thomas then sailed to Wales to study to be a ministry. On the way, they stopped at St. Helena of Africa, where Napoleon was there under lock and key, and they weren't game enough to let anybody off the ship that Thomas Hassall was on, because in fear of Napoleon escaping, which he'd already done before. So Thomas very well knew of Napoleon being on that island. And I've actually transcribed some letters with Graham and Kay Clapton, who's with us tonight, where Thomas is writing back home about Napoleon being on the island. While he was away, Thomas in England and Wales, 9 children of Roland's were granted land at O'Connell Plains. So 1818, that was only a few years after they'd cut a road through the mountains to get to the other side. And so Roland was one of the first ones through and saw the O'Connell Plains were very rich and perhaps a good place to live. 1821, Thomas returned to Parramatta before he'd finished his studies as a minister, because his father died on the 28th of August, 1820, and he died in an epidemic. He didn't die of old age. And he, with 2 grandchildren that also died in the epidemic, are buried in Parramatta Cemetery, St. John's, Parramatta. In February of, so Thomas didn't finish the studies, but Elizabeth MacArthur sent a letter to Bishop Broughton to say that he was a good man and should be made a minister. So the signing off of Thomas happened, and he became Reverend Thomas Hassall, and he was appointed a curate at St. John's, Parramatta, by Reverend Samuel Marsden, who was the minister at St. John's at the time. So a few months later, you can see that Thomas had already asked Anne to marry him, and one of the hardest things that Thomas Hassall ever had to do was apparently approach Samuel Marsden. He was as nervous as to ask for his daughter's hand in marriage. But I think if you can do that, Thomas and Reverend Samuel Marsden actually became quite good friends, and Reverend Samuel Marsden looked after Thomas. So now we're going to meet Thomas in a little bit more of a mature age. There he is, lovely photo of Thomas. In 1824, he with Anne were appointed assistant chaplain at Port Macquarie. He didn't last very long there because he was extremely put out about the treatment of the convicts in Port Macquarie, and nobody was going to change their ways. So Thomas decided to leave. Thomas, Anne and children left on one boat, and his library and possessions left on another boat, and unfortunately that boat sank and he lost about 300 books, I believe. In we're in the 1800s now, 1826, Reverend Samuel Marsden, Thomas Hassall, Reverend Samuel Marsden's wife, Betsy, and with Anne, but she would have been looking after little children a lot at this time. They were looking for land in Bathurst for a church to, so that a church could be established west of the mountains. And so they found land on the east side of the river, which is now Kelso, and Holy Trinity Church, which is now Kelso, was established, and Thomas Hassall was the relieving chaplain, but the church wasn't built then, but he did do the first burial, the first baptism and the first wedding for that first church in the parish of Bathurst. The parish of Bathurst was enormous. It went as right out west. 1826, he moved his family. He built a house on his land at O'Connell called Lampeter, where he was the town in which he studied in Wales, same name. And he had a lot of land there. He acquired more land. He bought his brother's land. He gave a lot of his land to the Anglican Church. He built Salem Chapel, and St. Thomas Anglican Church is still in O'Connell at the, while we speak. Also in 1826, which was a pretty busy year for Thomas, he had bought Denby down at Cobberty, where later 4 of his children were married. He married 4 of the children in St. Paul's at Cobberty. So he had lots of farms everywhere, and he ran those farms. His father had died. He was the oldest, so he also ran his properties for his mother and his sister. He also had done jury duty as a young teenager, I think, and so he did duties as a magistrate in the time while being minister and farming, etc. They did a lot of things. Thomas inherited an enormous amount of land from his father, Roland. And they had a lot of work to do. I don't know how they managed to do everything that they did in the ministry, in running farms, in breeding or horses, and in sheep, a lot to do with breeding sheep. But then, unfortunately, in the 1840s, the bank crash came. And because Thomas was an owner of the bank, he was liable in an unlimited way for the bank debts. And he lost most of his properties, I believe, except 2. Don't know why it stopped at 2, but that would have been a pretty tough time to go through, for not only for Thomas, but everybody around. So he was busy in those latter years with everything that he was doing, and he died in 1868 in Cobberty with 600 people attending his funeral, which was beside Heber Chapel, which he built at Cobberty. Thomas wasn't supposed to die then. He, against doctor's orders, decided to go and see a friend who'd called for him to visit him because the friend was unwell. And Thomas, of course, rode a lot, and he rode in the rain, and he became quite ill and died, unfortunately. Thomas gained the highest respect of Samuel Marsden and Bishop Broughton and many others. Governor Darling called him a prudent young man, and Manning Clark, who many of us tonight are related to, claimed there is no dark side to his heart. The strong woman beside him lived to the age of 92, and she died in 1885. And is buried in the vault next with Thomas down at Cobberty. Thomas was affectionately known as, now you're supposed to feel as if you're on a horse here, the Galloping Parson. And I found a wonderful etching of him on his horse. He went everywhere on his horse. Apparently he rode a pacer, which gave him a very comfortable ride, and he rode everywhere. He didn't bother to stay in houses. He just took off the saddle off his horse, put it down, used that as a pillow, slept a bit, and then kept going. He was also known as the Squire of Denby, which was the house he lived in for many, many years down at Cobberty, and his parishioners knew him simply as Thomas. A farewell address to Thomas goes like this, if I can move the photos. We, the principal inhabitants, do feel it a duty to address you. Oh, they're writing to Thomas Hassall, dear Reverend Sir, as a token of our high esteem and gratitude for your benevolent attention in your ministerial functions in the short time you have been amongst us, requesting you to accept our best thanks, and may the blessing of the Almighty accompany you and your family, Reverend Sir, your most devoted and obedient servants. Now that was written to Thomas when he was actually 33. And it was signed by about 35 men of and around the Bathurst area. So he left Bathurst area after a year of being there, but he kept going back there because he had land at O'Connell, and he was very, very highly regarded. The Reverend Thomas Hassall family, here we go. So we've got Thomas and his wife Anne, 9 children. I come through Catherine Elizabeth, who married Dr. Robert Culbertson Hope, and you'll notice that Marianne, Catherine's sister, one of Thomas and Anne's daughters, also married Robert Hope's brother, George. Some of you will have come from other ones of the children. Emily unfortunately died at 14 months. I should remember the story there of why she died, but I don't. And a few of the children were unmarried. Eliza became a missionary, and I'm not sure if she was the one that went into China. Can't remember, I do apologise. So here are the hit pics of the children of Reverend Thomas Hassall and Marsden. So we've got, they're in order. So there is James, good looking gentleman, don't you think? Catherine Elizabeth, Mary Ann, George, Harriet, Charles, and Eliza. There's a lot of family history that's family information that is being built onto a family tree maker, where a lot of our information is already, and we can help build all that information. And so we're all part of this wonderful, huge Hassall family. So years ago, the Hassall Family History Group was formed, and we've now changed our name into the Hassall Family History Association. And the History Association oversees 4 projects. I've talked a little bit about the transcription that I do every Wednesday night. There are 8,000 Hassall pages in the Mitchell Library which need transcribing. And we've started, and we hope that the love spreads to other people who might want to transcribe a few of those pages as well. The Heritage Project is finding all the remains, graves, buildings, etc., heritage items that are left, and we've got to find out what condition they're in and how best we can go about knowing whether they need restoration and how that's done. This is a little bit, shows you, you can see at the top of that excerpt there, it says Mr. Roland Hassall, using the German double S, and then writing after that. We're not going to try and read it tonight. The genealogy, as I mentioned, is through the family tree maker, and Graham will tell you a bit more about that. And the other project is on information that's put into books and papers that are where research has been done, and the publication of it all. The projects, though, sorry, that's just another building I threw in there to fill a lovely gap. The projects go now, they've all started. They're going to be built up to the reunion, and at the reunion we can all learn more about them. And the aim is not to finish at the reunion, but actually have these projects go on into the years to come. So few of you might actually know that photo. That was the Hassall family taken at the bicentenary. And so through that, you are a Hassall. The Hassalls saw, as I've touched on, lots of opportunities through business, through churches, through spreading word, through many opportunities that Roland took. I can't go into them now, but you will learn about them. All the stories are inspirational. They're nothing that is not. So our Hassall ancestors toiled through challenges, humility, dangers, tragedy, adversity, and they were enterprising, hardworking, persistent, successful, extremely wealthy before the bank crash came, and kind-hearted. So hopefully I've tweaked a little bit of your interest. You might decide that you'll just participate in the reunion, or somehow you might even get involved. Entirely up to you, no pressure anywhere. So from here we can see that a couple of books have been written. There's lots of books being written, but I've given you two. The Hassall Family, which was written for the bicentenary. The one on the top right-hand corner is written by my mother, the Hassalls and Marsdens of early Bathurst and O'Connell. The one where it says Hassall Park, my mother and I put in submissions to Oberon Council that the Hassalls had so much land at O'Connell that a park there should really have the name Hassall Park. And Oberon Council, because they care about their history, said, of course, we'll name the park Hassall Park. And that happened only about 4 years ago. So one of the little trips after the reunion, or the day after, I'd like to take whoever would like to hop in a car and come along, and we'll go and have a cup of tea in that park and look at a few things along the way. So that's the reunion, May 2023. Don't forget to put it in your diary. I want you to think that you're going to build your history as much or as little as you want to, and you'll get to know a few of the Hassalls. Those trees are where Mum and I went, knocked on the door of Thomas Hassall's property, Lampeter. He, of course, lived there a long time ago. We went, the people who lived there let us go into the property and down to the Fish River, where these 4 oak trees were planted by Thomas Hassall. And we found the stones, probably of his first cottage, that would have been formed part of his flooring, whether it was his lounge room or whatever, I don't know, but they were huge stone slabs. Those 2 sheds are near those trees in O'Connell, and Oberon Council, while we speak, are trying to work out the real history of those, and because they know that they belong to Thomas Hassall. And so they're very old, very precious examples of buildings, but let's hope that something can be done about them before they actually collapse. Inside the one under corrugated iron, there are some beautiful timber rafters that Thomas might have had built there, they're not sure. All of you in your own way would have done something about your Hassall family history. I had 3 boys, and what did I do when they were little? We went searching for family graves, and here they are sitting on Samuel Marsden's grave in St John's Cemetery, Parramatta. I'm sure you've all got your own stories of where you've taken your children or family. So, as you can see, there's family crests, coats of arms, the medieval one that the Hassalls had, and then it was developed into the other one. And I'm sorry I couldn't put the colour picture of it there, but there's the Hassall family coat of arms. And so because we've got so many Hassalls in Australia, the people, David Hassall and Hugh Hassall, and people who ran the bicentenary had the Hassalls of Australia coat of arms made, and that's that one. So thank you very much for listening, everybody. And I'm going to hand over to Graham to tell you a little bit more and to fill in the gaps, Graham, that I missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I'm just going to. I see you're. Could you just end the share screen?
Okay.
And
tell me how.
I think we're both moving the cursor at the same time there.
Oh, stop share.
Stop.
Okay.
Share. There we go. Yep. Okay, wonderful.
Thank you,
Alison. That was just superb. And you know, I just think that maybe there might be some questions for you. You've already explained about the association and our projects and our event next year. So I don't think we need to go through that again. I think you've done a superb job there. And really, you know, it seems to me that what we're doing is we're learning our family from 2 directions. One is from the time of Roland and Elizabeth and the children, and then their children. And then we're also learning from our own parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, and we're sort of putting the 2 together. And we know that I think I'm 7th generation. I'm either 6th or 7th. I've got to check my homework. 7th. So that I know that we've got 8th and 9th generation in our family, maybe even 10th. And it's a question of how we continue to find meaning out of this shared family history for the younger generation. So, you know, there's interest in learning, getting inspired by the stories of these wonderful people from 200 years ago, but there's also stories of people around us now who are pioneers in their own way in contemporary society, who have links to this family. So I think there's very many ways that we can build on each other's strengths and you know, and gain that sort of, in a sense, fortitude, you know, for the challenges of life, based on what Roland and Elizabeth did. They had this courage, stamina, fortitude, resilience, faith, and they put it all together and gave us this example. And I think there are so many reasons for us to be really happy to be associated with this story, with this heritage, and I think you've done a great job tonight. So maybe we can all thank Alison for this presentation before we have any questions. So
thank you. Thank you.
And I do want to ask if there are any comments or questions, and Ross also, from your perspective, not a member of the Hassall family, but closely associated for so many years with the association. What did you think of Alison's presentation, and what's your take on Thomas Hassall?
Oh, look, I think that's a superb presentation, Alison, and the work that you're doing in the library is just so important. We're talking at the college with the history coordinator about some of the special projects that students might undertake for the high school certificate, and family history can fit into those sorts of projects. So he's showing a little bit of interest, and I'm sure in between now and the reunion there'll be more to go there. Of course, in the early days, the Sunday schools were actually the schools. So in addition to teaching the Bible, the children were learning to read and to do mathematics. And I think it's for Thomas and Anne, they were both teaching that Sunday school in Parramatta at that as young people, 12 or 13 years of age. There was talk that perhaps they had a number of Indigenous kids also at that time. So there's a wealth of history. Do you know, I've looked a little bit at the O'Connell property, because that was of interest to me, how he came back from Port Macquarie and was, you know, offered O'Connell or Bathurst as that work to do. And there's a lovely story in old Australia about going out there and engaging with the Aboriginal people. But I'm just looking at the real estate out there, and I think that barn that he constructed is up for sale. And
you're right. And I don't know whether it is, you're exactly right. It is up for sale.
It's up for sale. It's up for sale in a range of 860 to 940,000, and it's right on the corner of O'Connell Road and Beaconsfield Road. So maybe the History Association ought to dig deep and purchase it and hold cups of tea there. It's your pleasure. But look, it's an amazing history. This is one of the early families, such an important influence, not just in the Christian work, but also in agriculture and education. And the reason that our school is named after Thomas Hassall is because in that area, he looked after 12 churches, which all ran schools at some time. The Galloping Parson name is because he was a very active fellow, as his family were, and we're very proud to hold that name, and we continue to learn more and more, and that's really helpful tonight. Thanks so much. It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. And
can I just
go
tell
ahead,
a little story about the building that Ross was talking about in O'Connell? Thomas Hassall had an occasion one night where two Aboriginal tribes were actually fighting each other, and one of the groups of people came rushing to Thomas's house and went up into the attics and hid, and Thomas had to think quickly on his feet, and he said, if you two, lots of people, because Chief Saturday was one of the tribe's chief, if you decide to back off and get on, I'll kill a beast and we can all have a feast. And so that happened as well. But along with just mentioning the Aborigines there, if you go to Hassall Park, the park that you can see in the picture behind me, Oberon Council were very clever, I think, in putting up an information board. One side of the board has the European history and the other side of the board has the Aboriginal history.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of care taken and interest at this stage, but we've got to just keep a watch and keep them going in the way that we want them to. And that said, Graham, I don't know whether I mentioned enough about artefacts, if people have them to bring to the reunion of the Hassall artefacts.
Well, you can mention it now.
Yes, that if you do have anything, and artefacts, of course, are things that have been brought here or easy to travel to the reunion, and it would be on display for the Saturday that we have out at Ross's school, the Thomas Hassall Anglican College. And it would be a great idea for everybody to share and see what other Hassall members have actually got as Hassall artefacts.
So Alison, I might just build on that with one idea that we have concerning the future of artefacts and documentation. What we understand is that if any particular family goes to an archive or a library and to say, I've got one photo album and I've got 60 letters, it's a very small collection, and it'll be catalogued under that acquisition. But if the association is able to pull together a larger set of papers, diaries, heirlooms, that we could create one larger collection to donate to a library or archive, and it becomes easier for researchers to find. So, for example, in the State Library of New South Wales, there are some 85 different collections that have material that refers to the Hassall family. Now, that's a natural occurrence because there are so many different ways this material emerges. But if we can eventually pool these materials and submit them at the one time, it could be a second substantial set as the first substantial set, the Hassall family papers in the State Library, 8,000 papers recognized as one set. And so this is just one idea, if we could be organized, sufficiently organized. Now, in the case of artifacts, we have this idea that we might be able to approach a museum, whether it's a museum in Parramatta, or whether it's the Powerhouse Museum. And we believe that by putting together individual artifacts, we could have a collection of one of the early settler families. It could be porcelain, clothing, Bibles, copies of letters, utensils. And I can just imagine people who could go into the Powerhouse Museum, haven't told the Powerhouse Museum this yet, but we could have a collection of materials from this early settler family with the type of timelines that Alison has shown, with some stories, and that could be a permanent display of our materials. It's just an idea, we haven't acted on it, but we want to talk about it in case it's a possibility for the future.
Yes, thank you, Graham. There's one artifact of Thomas Hassall's, his travelling communion set, which I think we need to secure back somehow, and where it would actually go, I'm not quite sure. It's in a place where it actually doesn't belong, never belonged there. It never had anything to do with where it is, and it should almost come back home. But we need to find out where that home should be for it.
And whereabouts is it being held now?
It's in Newcastle somewhere, in a religious place.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, how we go about securing it, I'm not really sure, because 9/10 of the law.
What, in a church up there somewhere?
Yep. Yep. And he didn't ever work there, but that's, you know, there's ideas like that that we need to try and work towards securing.
We do have a number of other researchers online with us tonight. You know, Richard Clark has been doing the genealogy for many years. He's shared that with the association. Richard, you may want to describe that long-term assignment that you've had to document that. And I'm going to invite Kay also, if you want to talk about your research interests in the James Line in Queensland and share anything on that as well. Richard, would you like to tell us a little bit about the process of collecting genealogical material and your hopes for that project in the future?
Oh, certainly, Graham. I suppose I was fortunate to visit the 200th reunion, and I retired a couple of years after that. And so for the last 22 years, one of my great interests has been researching histories of various families which myself and my wife descend from. And in my wife's case, one of the very prominent families is the Hassalls. And I've just been doing this on and on and on over the last 20 years. And Graham now has my work as it was maybe 18 months ago. It's changed, it's grown since then. However, what I've been focusing on in the last 3 years is contacting living Hassall descendants, and my focus is going to be on that between now and the reunion, just with a view to getting as many people as possible to come along. I think that the reunion will be an opportunity to excite people, and we can then build on the filling the gaps in the genealogical database that we have. We need to work out how we're going to operate it and maintain it, and how we're going to provide access to it. And one thing that concerns me, and which the association will need to address, is the question of the privacy of living individuals and what information we can hand out, or what consents we get from people when they provide information to us. I think these are things we'll have to address probably following the reunion, before there's any release of the data that has been collected is made. But my project for the next few months is continuing to trace Hassalls who are living, and to get them to join the association and to participate in its activities, and in particular to come to the reunion. And so that's what I'm going to be doing over the next 6 months.
Thank you, Richard. It's so very encouraging. I'm just going to share my screen just for a moment to give an impression of what this database looks like. And so there you have it. And just trying to get it on my screen as well. So I think you can see it at the moment. And I'm just trying and scroll if I can, just a moment. There we go. Okay, so I've got it focused on Thomas and Anne and their children, and you can move this around in many different ways. There's a lot of material that can be collected, and it's easy to add the next generations to this database. So, and that's basically Richard's work over many years, and we hope to be able to increase that. It links to the internet, links to Ancestry, links to all sorts of other databases, so that you can verify the information that we've got in there. So just a quick snapshot of that.
One comment I have too is, I don't profess that what's in the material I have is necessarily accurate. And I always welcome comments for corrections and additions. And also, there's a great lack of sources in my material, simply because I used to record sources, and then the software changed, and all my sources when I converted dropped out, and I've lost them. And that's something else we're going to have to go back and do, and basically verify our information and record the sources. But I've just got too old to do that.
I don't think you're too old to do it. But I understand it. It's one of those travails of researching. But thanks for that, Richard. Kay, have you got anything to say for yourself about, because you are an active researcher of many aspects of history, and you come from an interesting line of the family.
I was just going to say, before I move on to that, I mentioned Richard to my brother Don, who informed me that that Richard held the record for running at school for a very long time, the GPS record, I think. So he was pretty impressed to know that you were on the job, Richard. And he also knows of the station where Rosemary was from, out near Mount Garnet, I think. So it's interesting seeing connections. My primary interest really is the colonial history. So, you know, the Hassalls and the Marsdens in early colonial New South Wales, I find fascinating. And then moving up into Queensland to wherever the Hassalls and their various families spread. So I deeply regret I used to live at Corinda for a while and never ever went to the Church of England at Sherwood, where Reverend James Hassall was for a long time, and where a lot of the his family were buried. I didn't know the connection back then when I lived in Corinda, so I wish I had.
Thanks, Kay. Alison, I'm going to hand it over back to you. You may prompt anybody online with any questions or some comments that you may want to draw out from them before we bring this session to a close, or invite anybody who wants to share some other stories or important information or ideas about how we proceed with everything that Alison spoke about.
Yes, thank you, Graham, and thank you for giving all the added information to go along with my presentation this evening. Does anybody want to ask me any questions about what I presented? Any questions from the
Yes.
floor?
What is a pacer, and why was he called the galloping parson if he was on a pacer?
Oh, Graham, don't ask that. That's awkward. Okay, a gallop and a pacer. Kay, you'll have to help me out here. A pacer has two legs on the side of the horse that move forward at the same time, and the other two move forward together. So you've got one side moving forward and the other side moving forward, and it gives a smoother ride rather than a trotter that legs work differently. Galloping parson, I guess that just sounds better than a pacing parson. So
I know it's not the most important question, but it's something we've learned together. And we had to work out what a pacer was and why it was more comfortable for him to ride long hours by using a pacer.
Yes, yes. And those fellows, when you think about it, what they had to endure weather-wise, and the roads aren't like we've got now, and what food would they have taken with them? The long ways that they had to go, the hardships, it's quite incredible to imagine how do they prepare for going off for days and on like that. It's just quite extraordinary. When the Thomas Hassall Anglican College first opened, Ross, I went down and spoke to the children who were fairly young there, and we were all put in one of the first buildings there, and along with the help of my mother, we were talking to the children, and I can remember opening up with all these children looking at me, and I said, well, hands up if you turned the light on this morning. And of course all their hands went up. Hands up who turned a tap on and you could clean your teeth with running water. All their hands go up. Hands up those who could get some cereal out of a packet and pour milk onto it from a jug. Get all their hands. Well, Thomas Hassall couldn't do any of that. And the hardships are just enormous once you start thinking about them, but I guess that's life, isn't it? Imagine people looking back on us in 200 years' time.
We still present to the children in year 2 every year, following on from that tradition. And by the way, if anyone wishes to drop in on the college at any time, please do that. You're quite welcome, and it'd be lovely to show you around.
Thank you. I notice we've got Henry online. Henry Quinn is listening to us from Switzerland. Is that right, Henry?
I don't know if you can hear me, but that's right. Yeah.
Yep, that's right. Isn't that fantastic? An interest in the Hassall family coming all the way halfway across the world. Thank you so much for attending.
I read a book on Samuel Marsden recently.
Yes.
The survivors.
Well, what their lives are just amazing. So any other questions, or are you just going to be like a high school class and all hang your heads and don't want to ask anything? I can tell. Yes. Any questions? No, okay. Actually, Graham, I think we've done very well time-wise, and I'm quite happy to release these people. So thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Graham.
Thank you, Alison, and it's been wonderful. So we look forward to having something similar again for the Thomas and Anne line in the future. Maybe early next year, we'll have another run of these sessions before we have the event in May. Thanks so much for coming online tonight. Thank you, Alison, and we'll end the session now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.